Hello friends. As you probably know, I'm a competitive TF2 player, and I've spent more time than I care to admit playing this game and theorizing about it and trying to become good at it. Recently, I've decided to step down from continuing to compete in the game any longer, as I've sort of lost my passion for it. I've come to realize though that there is probably a lot that I could share from my own journey with this game that could help other people who are interested in improving at it. I've noticed that there is very little content like this on competitive TF2 out there, and most of it is very basic and is aimed toward newer players. Now, while I think TF2 is a pretty simple game, I think there is a bunch of pretty interesting concepts and areas of improvement within the game that I have spent time thinking about and trying to implement when trying to win over the competition I've had over the years. After I quit playing in 7 a few years back, I took on the task of creating my own team and trying to lead it to the best of my ability. And I think that is what grew me the most as a player. And that's the first topic that I wanted to make a video about. Now, I want to start with defining what I mean by leading a TF2 team. So I want to clarify my definition of the word in this instance. By leading, I don't really mean booking scrims and making sure that your team is going to show up to scrims on time. Like, sure, those aspects might be a part of it, but what I'm talking about here is mostly main calling and managing the in-game aspect of leading your team, and just everything that is included with that. So let's start with the topic of picking the right players for your team. What should you look for in your players if you are creating a team with winning in mind? Oftentimes, you will see people try to scout the players who have the highest mechanical ability possible. You know, the players with the best logs. And that makes sense, because a player who is mechanically ahead of his opponents will have a big impact, and they will help your team win. Yet, there is some factors that you should take into consideration. If you haven't made a name for yourself yet in the scene, and you aren't already at the top, you're probably going to struggle to get players who already have a great mechanical ability, players who already have great DM. You will struggle to get them to join your team, because they will be looking for the best team that they can get. And even if you do manage to get a player like this on your team, there's pretty good chances that they will not be good at dealing with adversity at all, especially if they consider themselves to be the best player in the team. They might create a toxic environment, and if your team struggles to get good results, they are very likely to jump ship the very first opportunity they get to do that. In my opinion, when you're building a team, you should pick players with the right attitude and mindset over the players with the best possible mechanical ability. Obviously, ideally, the player you choose has both. So let's talk about the values that make up a great mindset for a player. I think one of the most important values you can have is being humble. And I don't mean somebody who thinks that they are bad and constantly put themselves down. I mean somebody who is humble enough to accept criticism without taking it as an offense. You need somebody who understands that for the team to improve, they themselves must improve with the team, regardless of what skill level they believe they are at individually. Having a team of 6 people who can all at least somewhat take criticism is incredibly important. A good way to check a player's attitude is to give them some criticism in a situation in the game and just see how they react to it. You will be surprised to see how many players immediately get incredibly defensive in this situation. The best kind of players are the ones who are able to listen to the criticism, not argue with you about it, and try to implement the needed changes in the moment the best they can, and then potentially have a more in-depth conversation with you about the criticism you gave them when there's a good time for it, if that is something that they think is required. Players like this, however, are very hard to come by. Now let's get to the main point of this video, the main fundamentals that I have discovered to be the most important when leading a team. And these are from my personal experience, and they are also in no particular order. The first one might actually be one of the most important ones though, and that is taking responsibility. How can you expect your teammates to take responsibility for their errors if you don't take responsibility for yours? It is extra important for you to do this as the leader of the team, because it is really too easy to be too fixated on the mistakes that your team is doing to notice the errors that you're making yourself. Especially as you are leading the team, you have to take full responsibility for everything that is happening in the game. If a player is doing the wrong thing all the time, it becomes your responsibility to try to get that player to change their ways. After all, that is the task that you take on when you're leading a team. But even more importantly, it is important to take responsibility for the mistakes you make, which you make plenty of, regardless of your skill level. This sets a good example for the rest of your team, and as you do this, you will notice your teammates doing the same thing more and more. Your teammates are not going to want to listen to you if all you do is point the finger at them and demand things from them. Sometimes you have to drop the ego, admit you fucked up, and make sure that your team knows that you are aware of the mistake that you have made. The next important concept that I want to talk about is taking authority over the team and doing it in the right way. This might seem obvious, but it doesn't come naturally to everybody. A good leader needs to be able to command players to do certain things, get people to shut up when the comms are getting too hectic, and be able to intervene in conflicts your teammates might get in if your team is suffering because of them. The important thing is to try to remember to keep your own ego out of it the best you can. You don't want your teammates to feel like you're trying to feel superior over them. You have to do this in a way where everybody understands that this is simply how a team must run in order for it to not fall apart into chaos. In a team, there always has to be a leader that is able to take authority over the team and have the team listen to him and respect him enough for there to be good structure within the team. This is a skill that you have to practice, and if you aren't careful with it, you will come off the wrong way and your teammates will not want to follow your lead because they will misunderstand your intentions. The next thing I want to talk about is listening to your team and coming to conclusions via discussions. You have to understand that your role as a leader is not necessarily to just boss people around and have everything go exactly the way you want it. This is simply not possible because different players have different ideas and quirks to their game that have to be taken into account. You should take the time in between games to listen to your teammates' input and really value it. It's really easy to fall into this trap of undermining the input of your teammates and considering it inferior to your own views. If a player on your team disagrees with you on a gameplay matter, you should take the time to discuss it with them. If you keep an open mind and you don't have your head too far up your ass, one of two things will happen. You will either convince them of why your approach is better, or you will realize that their perspective is potentially correct and you can try it out in the game. If you're able to implement this properly, you don't have to worry about your teammates not respecting you, because you will still be doing the heavy lifting that comes with leading the team, but also they will feel like they're not being forced to play your style, but that everything that you do as a team is up for debate, as it should be. The next topic is managing expectations, understanding inconsistency, and dealing with bad results. It is really important to understand that your team is a collective of 6 people. Everybody has their own strengths and their own weaknesses. Inconsistency as a team is simply unavoidable, especially at the beginning. Understanding this will help you detach your own ego from your in-game results, and it will help you deal with adversity that you will face as a team. And I'm not saying that you should blame your team when you lose. On the contrary, you should take full responsibility for it. But you shouldn't blame yourself. You see, there's a difference between taking responsibility and pointing blame. There is never any reason to do the latter. When you take responsibility for your team losing, you are likely to take the necessary steps to change things for the better. But when you are pointing blame at yourself or your teammates, you are simply creating a toxic environment within the team, and you're not taking the necessary action to change things for the better. The next thing I want to talk about is striving to learn rather than to win everything. To win, you must first learn, right? Only by first adapting the mindset that you're playing to learn can you start winning after. Nobody's going to win without first taking the time to learn as much as they can. Counterintuitively, trying to win is probably going to make you lose more. And being obsessed with winning is going to create a lot of suffering for you when you fail to hit that goal consistently. Competition is always going to involve winning and losing both. And by being fixated on only winning, you will miss out on the opportunities that losing will give you. A loss will teach you 100 times more than a win if you don't let your emotions get in the way. The next thing I want to talk about is recognizing the best way you can contribute to your team in a positive way in the moment. I have a very good example for this, and that is one of the most successful team leaders the EU scene has had. That's Cadis. Something that I've noticed about his style of leading after having played with him for a while was his ability to lift the spirits of his team and give his everything in important matches and tournaments, especially at LAN. Oftentimes, he could be quite harsh in scrims, and generally he was not concerned with sparing his teammates' feelings when he felt he needed to get something said during practice. You might think that this is how he was during important games too, But really, that couldn't be further from the truth. You see, when you are performing on the big stage, that is the moment that you have practiced for. You no longer have the time to teach your team any more than you already have, nor can you really fix the big picture mistakes during the series. Your energy then, as a leader, is best used on trying to create the optimal environment for your team to perform. Cadis was always incredibly encouraging toward his team during the big games. Even when things were going bad, he was still actively trying to lift his teammates' spirits because he recognized that it would not have been an effective approach to be harsh toward his team at that time, when it came down to trying to win the match. The next topic is not overdoing it, not micromanaging too much. A good boss will let their employees do their work in peace, trusting them to do it well, and only occasionally step in with guidance or commands. When you are really invested into a game, as a leader, you might be talking all the time, and it's really easy to get carried away with it. Counterintuitively, it is often better to take a step back, be more quiet, and just let your team perform. This way you can better spot out the really key mistakes that your team might be making, and focus all of your energy on correcting those mistakes. Also, the less you say, the more carefully your team will listen to you. If you talk about 500 different things every night, it will all become a blur in your teammate's head, and basically nothing is going to be learned. The next topic is making sure everybody knows their role in the game and in comms. I think TF2 tends to be a pretty straightforward game, and it's not incredibly difficult to get your team on the same page. But one of the very essential things you need to lock down is making sure that everybody on your team knows their role in each and every situation. You want your players to know what flanks they're expected to watch, what doors they have to have on lockdown, what classes they need to shoot on mid-fights or last pushes. Really, the details are down to you. That's what you come up with as a team and as a leader. The important part is understanding that everybody needs to have their role well understood for them to be able to play well with the team and for it to not turn into a complete shitfest. The next really important topic is recognizing the flaws that you have personally and working on them, rather than only focusing on your teammates. This is something that I have struggled with a lot myself. As a leader, one of the biggest traps is to fall into spending all of your time focusing on what your teammates are doing and trying to correct their mistakes. You have to remember that you are also a player on the team and you make mistakes all the time. There has to be a fine balance of focusing inwards and outwards in this situation. Somebody who is just a player on your team will often have an easier time with this because they will just get to focus on what they are doing personally. So you have to pay extra attention to this and catch yourself failing to do this at times. The next time your team is having a tough time and you seem to be unable to fix the problems that you are having, you should ask yourself if you have focused enough on your own game and played your role properly. You need to be both playing well and leading well. Lastly, I want to talk about encouraging the team and trying to create a positive environment. I already talked a little bit about this in the previous example with Cadis, but I think it deserves its own explanation. One of the biggest factors that determine how your team is playing is the attitude that you guys have as a collective. Getting emotional and frustrated creates a cycle in the team where everybody ends up feeding off of each other's negativity and anger, and it will seriously hinder your performance in the game. Having a positive environment where everybody's encouraging each other and noticing each other's nice plays and calls will likely make everybody play better as well. This is not something that you can always have control over because your team has 6 people in it and somebody's bound to get emotional every now and then. But as a leader, you can greatly affect the environment by being the one to make the effort to spread positivity in the comps even when it seems difficult. Just something simple like complimenting your teammates' play is going to go a long way. Alright, that's everything I had to say about this topic. This was kind of an experimental video for me. It's not something that I've ever really done before. I was trying to record my own voice like this, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it doesn't seem too robotic or awkward. I'm going to try to make similar TF2 related videos in the future, I believe. So stay tuned for that on this channel. And for now, thank you for watching, and go make yourself a TF2 team if you got some time in your hands, and if this video has made you want to do that. Hopefully it has. But yeah, thank you guys. I'll see you in the next one.